Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing good. Now, today I've got a very special guest. I'm joined by Arsenal fan Frank Hastings, and I'm really looking forward to having you on today. I thought we could speak a bit about the season, a bit about Arsenal, and yeah, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad, thank you. And thank you for having me on as well. I've seen a few of the interviews that you've done with my colleagues over at AFTV, and they've been really good. So it's a pleasure to be on, and I'm looking forward to speaking today. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you so much. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to chatting with you about Arsenal. But I thought before we talk about the season, to those that might want to know a bit more about you, I thought you could just tell them a bit about yourself and maybe how you became an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, of course, I can do that. So obviously, my name's Frank Hastings. Some of you may recognise my face from my cameos on AFTV on the information station mainly, where I provide stats and insight on the games that are going on the live watch-alongs. I'm 22 years old. Some people can't quite believe that because of mainly because of the beard,
Weird,
really.
yeah.
Yes, a lot of people can't quite believe that. And in terms of becoming an Arsenal fan, I've been an Arsenal fan from as long as I can remember. So the Arsenal supportership comes from my dad's side of the family, who are Woolwich, East London based. So it obviously goes back to when Arsenal was Woolwich Arsenal. It's passed through from generation to generation. Whilst I can't really remember my dad being much of a football fan, he was still an Arsenal fan.
Yeah,
Obviously, my knowledge and stuff like that comes from mainly from his brother, my uncle, who I wanted to be like a lot when I was growing up. So it
yeah,
really comes from that. In terms of my mum's side, they were all West Ham. They were all desperate for me to be West Ham. I feel like I've made the right choice in the end with that one, though. Of
yeah,
course, yeah, I'm so glad I didn't choose West Ham in the end. Funny enough, my actual first Arsenal game was away at West Ham. I think it was 2012. We won 3-1. Olivier Giroud, Walcott, and Santi Cazorla scored, and I was actually in the West Ham end, so that was a bit of a that was a bit of a
yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, it
So
would have
that
been
was one of
hard
my.
not to celebrate when we scored.
Oh no, I couldn't. I remember that vividly. I had to celebrate the West Ham goal, and I couldn't celebrate the Arsenal goals until me and my uncle got in the cab to go back, because then it was deemed safe enough for us to actually celebrate the goals.
Yeah,
And in terms of actually going to see Arsenal at the Emirates, my first game, I was a bit of a late bloomer. My first game at the Emirates wasn't until the 2014 Emirates Cup. I would have been 12 years old, against Monaco, which we actually lost. So it wasn't the best of starts to life at the Emirates for me, but still a fond memory, absolutely.
I love that. I always love hearing about people's journeys because it's so different. Everyone's are so different. I mean, I think it's so special. I do love that. I'd also love to know as well, especially with you growing up, who was kind of your favourite players that you love watching? I mean, and it's hard to pick because we've had so many amazing players over the years.
Of course, absolutely. So obviously, the one that stands out for me, obviously, my sort of memories are only from 2006 onwards. My
Yeah,
first memory of Arsenal was the Champions League final, which we won't speak anymore on
yeah,
that. But
heartbreaking time.
the
Yeah,
one that stands out for me, and I've got the number tattooed on my wrist here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Roman numerals, but that's the number 14. So
oh,
the big one for me is absolutely the King, Thierry
mhm.
Henry. But I only really got to see one season of Thierry before he left for Barcelona.
Yeah,
One of the first times that I cried at
yeah,
Arsenal when he left. So that's the one that really stands out for me. But in terms of actually growing up and seeing them play, I think the biggest ones for me that stand out, Alexis Sanchez was always a favourite
yeah,
of
he was
mine. One of the
amazing.
one of the
Yeah,
one of the best players during the Emirates era. Slightly controversial one, and I don't think everyone's going to agree with this, but Theo Walcott was a fan favourite of mine. Obviously, when playing in the park and stuff, and when I wasn't as fresh faced, when I was fresh faced and didn't have the beard, I used to get a lot of people saying that I used to look like Theo. I never saw it personally. I was quite fast. I played out up top. I played on the wing. So I used to get, the Theo Walcott similarities get told to me. So Theo Walcott was a massive favourite of mine. And then another one for me, not just because we share the
mm,
same birthday, but for me, one of the most underrated players to ever play for Arsenal. It has to be Santi Cazorla, a real special player for me, absolutely.
yeah. We've had so many. It's so hard to pick. I mean, I started to watch Arsenal around 2015, and I think I really liked Walcott as well. I think he
Yeah,
was a bit underrated as well. Sanchez for me. I mean, I know he went to United, but I think you can clearly see Arsenal was always his club. So yeah, I love that. It is so there's so many players you could pick from. We've been quite blessed to have so many amazing players over the years, and
absolutely.
obviously Arsenal now. The season has just ended, and for me, last season, I would probably I think I felt more kind of hurt and devastated than proud. I did feel proud, but I felt very gutted because a lot of us believed we would really do it last season,
Mm.
and this season, obviously Man City have been so good. Liverpool did kind of compete for a while. I know they lost to Everton and sort of struggled with that, but for us, obviously, we didn't give up, and that's what I really am happy about. I'm really happy we've gone all the way to the end, but we did fall short, 2 points behind Man City. I mean, how do you reflect on the season right now?
Well, listen, like you said, it's really disappointing not to end the season, not just with the Premier League, but not a trophy at all, because I feel that because of that, people will forget just how good we have
Yeah,
actually been. It's the most wins we've ever got in a Premier League season, the most goals we've ever scored in a Premier League season, the least amount of goals we've ever conceded in a Premier League season. And for me, I would actually say we have still been the best team in England, despite not
yeah,
picking up the trophies that Manchester City had. Let Manchester City have. Who won the Carabao Cup? Was it Liverpool that won the Carabao Cup?
yeah, it might have
So
been.
to not end the season with at least a trophy was heartbreaking for me. But I said it in a video on my Instagram the other day. I'm still incredibly proud of the progress that we have made as a club under Mikel Arteta, and the progress that the players have made on the pitch as well. Going back to last season, I completely agree with what you said in
Yeah,
terms of it was more anger than anything because we was in such a good position for so long. I think we was on top of the table for, what was it, 36 of the 38 weeks,
yeah, it was a
something
very long time. We were up there.
something like that. And to not get it done for me was mind blowing. But that just shows you still the strength that Manchester City possess within
Yeah,
their team. And and we've got to give full congratulations to Manchester City while we're on that subject as well, because it's very hard to compete with this Manchester City team
yeah,
over a 38 game season. And we'll put the 115 charges aside for now, because it's not the players' fault that Manchester City decided to break the rules, and they've got a fantastic squad of players that have managed to get the job done through. I mean,
yeah,
four titles in a row is an incredible achievement, and the players and Guardiola should be incredibly proud of that. So it's congratulations to them, but I don't think it's over for us, because again, we should
mm,
still be proud of this season regardless of if we won a trophy or not. And you could still see that everyone in that team put in 110%
yeah.
to try and win the title. But it is what it is, and we just didn't manage to get it done.
Yeah, it does. It's obviously it's a tough one to take. I mean, a lot of people have been looking back on games we could have won. I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people have mentioned the Villa game, and I think for me, looking back, I feel okay that we didn't win against Villa because you look at Villa
Mm-hmm.
this season, they're very different to what they've been recently
Of
in
course,
recent
absolutely.
years. So they're much better than what they were. I think the games that I do look at, I think the Fulham one for me is one that I look at the most because we
Mm-hmm.
really should be picking points in that type of game. But I feel like we couldn't have done any more, really. I think playing against Man City, competing against
Yeah.
them, it feels like impossible. It's so tough. I mean, for
I
you,
understand.
you
I
feel like we
understand
could
where.
have done
Yeah,
more. Yeah,
I understand where you're coming from, and I completely agree with what you're
mm,
saying about the Fulham game. I don't look at the Villa games
yeah,
specifically because Unai Emery's done a fantastic job over there. They've qualified for the Champions League for the first time since it became the Champions League, I believe. So credit to Unai Emery for that as well. I also look at mainly for me it's the Fulham game and it's the West Ham at home.
yeah,
I think I can't quite remember the score, but those two are the real disappointments for me. And then I sort of chuck the Newcastle result in there as well, not even
yeah,
necessarily because of the way we played. I think VAR had an absolute nightmare that day. Was the ball out? It's up for debate, but the big one for me was the decision on Gabriel,
mm,
for it to not be a foul that led to their goal that won them the game. So I think you look at the Fulham West Ham game specifically, but you can probably chuck the Newcastle one in there as quite a big disappointment as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, that Newcastle one. I remember after that game, I was so frustrated with that. I think so many factors will change, but I think looking back, I do feel more proud. Like I said, the season.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's really difficult because people outside of Arsenal will say, "Yes, you've progressed, but you've not won many trophies. You've won, an FA Cup, a few Community Shields." And I think as Arsenal fans, we clearly see that we've improved a lot this season. But I think we know trophies obviously will come along the way, and I'm quite confident that we will win, more silverware. I think we have been very unfortunate because we've obviously had Liverpool quite early on in like the FA Cups, and you would hope to get Liverpool maybe in a final.
Yeah,
So
of course.
I think we obviously have been very lucky with that. I mean, I know Arteta did a little bit of a speech at the end of the game, and he did say that him and the players weren't really satisfied with how it's gone. I mean, are you confident that Arteta can get us over the line? Because I know some fans might think this is the furthest he can take us.
Of course, I understand where you're coming from there, and I'm
Mm,
glad obviously you mentioned about Mikel's speech at the end of the
yeah,
game. Obviously, him and Martin came out at the end of the game and spoke, and it was really a moment that almost gave me goosebumps to listen to because I genuinely believe, after hearing what I heard
yeah,
from Mikel, that we will go on to win some form of silverware next season. It's the attitude of, I think he understands that, we probably should have won something, and I think he's accepting of that, and he knows deep down that it's probably not good enough in a way, and it's obviously sharing the same upset as us. But I don't think the fans are as upset as he might believe they are, because regardless,
yeah,
for me at least, I think it's still been a successful season and a season of progress for us. Absolutely, Mikel has produced magic over the last couple of seasons. Like I said, most wins in a season, most goals in a season, least
yeah,
goals conceded in a season. It's he's put together a case, and again, it's going to sound crazy because we haven't won anything to back it up. He's put together a case
yeah,
to say that we are looking at one of the best Arsenal squads of all time, up there with the Invincibles, up there with the '89 squad, up there with the teams that have won the trophies. We just haven't been able to do so currently. But like I said, I think, silverware is absolutely coming back to the Emirates next season. Pep isn't going to be around forever. City are only going to get away for so long without facing the consequences of the charges. However, I just think it would be extra special if we could win it
yeah.
whilst you still had the manager like
Mm.
Guardiola at a team like Manchester City. If we could go on and win a trophy while you've still got managers like that in the game, I think it would be a real statement from Arsenal Football Club.
Yeah, it would be amazing because I think to be able to beat Pep's Man City side, it would just
Mm,
show you how good we are. I mean, I think Pep recently said that he's probably closer to leaving than probably
absolutely,
staying,
yeah.
and I think thank God for that because I just want us to win something.
You
But
say thank God, but you can
yeah,
only imagine who they're going to get in next with all that money. That's for sure.
I know that's the thing. I feel like the replacement would be just too good. I mean, Klopp
Of course.
leaving. I think for me, like with Klopp leaving, when I heard it, it did surprise me. But I think it doesn't really surprise you because when managers have been there for a while, they've won things, they want to win. And I think with Klopp, I think you could see he was quite tired towards the end. And
Yeah,
I
of course.
think with football, you have to put a lot of time into it, and I think managers do need that time away from it. So I think with the Premier League, I think obviously Liverpool with the new manager, I think it's getting more competitive. It is so hard to compete with Man City though. It's hard. I mean, I hope we can win the league next season, but I do feel like you said, I feel confident. You can see with Arteta that we might not have won anything this season, but we've improved massively. And I think defensively, like since I've supported Arsenal, I've not ever seen a better defence than this. Like in the last
We've been
10
through the
years, yeah.
Mustafis, and we've been
Oh,
through the
we've been
Mustafis
through
and the
it all.
Koscielnys and the
Yeah,
Socrates. We've been in the trenches, but obviously, like you said, the defense that we've got at the
yeah,
moment, that partnership of William Saliba and Gabriel Magalhaes, not only the best in the league for me, but currently the best in Europe. I'm not
yeah,
saying that individually they're the best defenders in the world, but if you're looking at a partnership
mm,
together, I think you're looking at the best duo in the world. And on top of that, you've got the likes of Ben White, who's played fantastically out on that right hand side, which I think people forget is not his natural position. He's been
yeah,
crafted into that kind of right back by Mikel Arteta, and he's done a fantastic job there. And in that left back position, I think, he had an okay season, Zinchenko, but I think the standout for me this season would have been Tomiyasu.
yeah,
With the way he, again, not a natural left back, and he's come in and done the job there in that inverted role. But for me, the big one, especially coming back from injury, Yuri and Timber on that
yeah.
left hand side in that inverted role. I'm really looking forward to seeing how a back four of Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel, and Yuri and Timber works. Absolutely.
Yeah, I really loved him. But I remember when he played his first game in that Community Shield, and I just thought his performance was flawless. I
Mm,
just thought he would be our player of the season if he was fit. But next season, like you said, it's really exciting times for him to come back. I think the left back position this season, I think, has been a bit of maybe a weakness, but I think we've been able to get through it. So it probably
of
doesn't seem as
course,
a
yeah.
weakness to other people because defensively we have been so strong. So Yeah, I think Tomiyasu Kivior obviously swapped a bit, but I think you've seen more of Tomiyasu now that he's got his fitness back up. So,
Of
yeah,
course.
I think it does feel like a really good time at the moment to be an Arsenal fan. And obviously, this season we have had highs, we've had lows, but I think the highs has really, been amazing. And for you, which, game or which memory this season would you say has been your favourite?
That's a good question, and I can think of. I got a short list. I got a short list of 3 games that I
Yeah,
think have been highlights of the season for me. I think the standout, of course, would be the win against Manchester City at the
yeah,
Emirates. It had been so long since the last time we beat them in the league. So to do, be in a position where we're
mm,
challenging for the title and beating one of the people that could potentially, well, I say potentially, they ended up doing it in the end, but will be competing with us for the title. I think it was a real statement, and I feel like that was where I started to believe that we would go on to win the league. I think the difference between this season and last season is we was able to beat the teams and not lose to the teams that we were challenging against. Last season, we still lost both games to Manchester City. We got 1 win against Liverpool, of course, and got the draw at the Anfield, which was great as well. But to go on and not lose a single game to Manchester City this year was really impressive for me, and I think that's where I really started to believe that we could do it. On top of that, you look at the first Champions League game back at the Emirates. We hadn't played Champions League football since 2017, and again,
yeah.
the less said about that last time in the Champions League, the better. But that game against PSG, not PSG, PSV
Mm,
at the Emirates, to hear that music at the Emirates, it was emotional. I think you probably wouldn't have seen it on the information station because the camera kind of cuts away from me, but there was tears in the eyes to hear that music at the Emirates was really special. And obviously, just to round off those
yeah.
games, more of a personal highlight for me, I will go with the 6-0 thrashing of Lens in the Champions League, which I believe was either the last or the second to last game in the group.
Mm,
Of course, a massive result, but for me, it was special in the sense that it was my first experience in a box seat at the Emirates. So it's definitely a memory that I'll
yeah.
cherish for many years to come. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's been so many amazing games. I think when you're actually there, it's a completely different
Of
experience.
course, yeah.
Yeah, I went to I think it was a Burnley game. I think we won 3-1, and it was just the first half was a bit flat, but the second half we came
Mm.
out so much better, and it's just so nice to see the fans sing all the players' songs, and it's
Yeah, of
I think,
course.
I think when you're there in like real life, it's so much nicer. So I do love that game. I think when we thrashed Chelsea, that's the one that does stand out to me. Like I think for me, the NHLC in recent years haven't been as good as they used to be, but it just feels good getting a bit of revenge on them. It
Of
feels really
course.
nice. Yeah, I think the Man City game for me when we beat them, I think obviously it surprised me, but I think it just shows you, that we have
Mm.
changed. In recent years, we used to get beaten a lot by them, 5-0
Mm.
or whether that's a 1-0, and we wouldn't always compete with them. It's been hard to compete with Man City, but I think it just
Yeah,
shows you now that we're able to do that. We're up there, and yeah, there's been so many incredible games. Yeah, it's been a
yeah.
really good season. It's always nice to reflect, look back on all the good
Yeah.
times, and
Just an honourable mention on that as well. I didn't mention it in the shortlist, but another standout for me was the Liverpool game at home as well. That was
oh,
another
that
one
was
of the
good.
games.
Yeah,
I haven't been able to go to as many games this season because I think the club have really, really messed up the way they deal with the
the
tickets and stuff
tickets.
like
Yeah,
that.
it's been hard.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
ticketing system has been an absolute nightmare this year. So I've had to go elsewhere to get my tickets and stuff like that. But the game against Liverpool at home as well for me, I was in the front row for that. And that was a really special moment as well. I think that Trossard scored the last goal, and everyone came and celebrated right in front of us. There's a clip that went around on Arsenal social media of me going absolutely crazy at the goal as well, which was an interesting post from them. It's nice to be on the Arsenal page, of course, and that was
Yeah.
another highlight for me. Absolutely,
Oh, that game was amazing. I remember when
yes.
Van Dijk and Alisson made that mistake, and it felt nice because
Yeah,
someone
absolutely.
does
You know
make
what?
some mistakes.
I kind of felt sorry for him, and yes, absolutely, it's nice to see us not making the defensive mistakes as well. But whilst I was happy that we scored the goal, I felt so sorry for Allison because I'm a goalkeeper
Yeah,
myself, and I understand what it's like to be in that situation. It's awful, but I'm just glad it didn't happen to Arsenal for once. We made our mistakes in goal later in the season against Brentford and
yeah.
stuff like that, but it was nice to be on the other end of a mistake for once, for sure.
Oh, it was so nice. Yeah, I think that gave us confidence. I know you mentioned
Of
Trossard as
course.
well. He scored after that, and that was amazing. I think that game's definitely up there for me. It's been such an amazing season, and I know I mentioned before about trophies and stuff. I think Arteta. We know he's won an FA Cup, like I said, a few Community Shields, and we know the progress he's done. But for next season, do you think he's under a bit more pressure to win things? Because I think if you're an outsider, you're looking and you think, he's not won as much as other
Mm.
managers, and he might not get that credit he deserves because he's not got that silverware. So do you think next season is going to be a big season for him in order to win things?
Yes and no. It's an interesting question because ultimately, for a club like Arsenal, the measurement of success is trophies. Have
Hmm.
we won enough under Arteta? An FA Cup, 2 Community Shields? Probably not. But if you
Hmm.
look at where we were, even as early as Arteta's second season, we were miles off it. We finished eighth twice in a row. We
Yeah,
weren't even. We only got Europe that one year because we won the FA Cup. The second year we finished eighth, we weren't even in Europe. So if you look at where we were challenge to now challenging once again, all thanks to Arteta. I feel like that sort of,
mm,
regardless of what happened, gives him a little bit more leeway in terms of the pressure on his job. However, with that being said, if we don't win anything next season, I believe we need to start asking the tough questions. And I'm not saying that to
yeah,
say he's going to be sacked. It's a situation of we need to sit over it and think and talk with Mikel. It's a situation of, well, we've spent X amount and it's
mm,
silly amount of money now, and it's the kind of money that we should be spending and getting trophies as a result of it. But there needs to,
yeah,
if we don't win anything, we need to ask the questions to Mikel. We spent all of this money. When are we going to start seeing some silverware? I don't think there's any situation in which his job is under any real threat
yeah,
unless we don't qualify for Champions League as a minimum. But I do think, and I am confident that we will win at least one
mm,
trophy next season, whether that's the
yeah,
Carabao Cup, whether that's the FA Cup, whether it's the Champions League. We can only hope. Whether it's the Premier League, I
yeah.
think we'll bring something back to the Emirates. Absolutely.
Yeah, I always, I love an FA Cup. I remember when we won it, it felt so
Yeah.
amazing to win it. And I know with the Premier League, because obviously I've never really seen us win one, so
Hmm.
it would be nice to see that. But
Of course. Yeah.
I think as well, I think the League Cup's weird because a lot of fans, some fans, really not a big fan of it. I've
I
spoken to
get it.
some
Yeah.
fans that don't rate it, and personally for me, a trophy's a trophy. If we won
Yes.
next season, if we won
Mm,
the League Cup and we won an FA Cup. I think,
mm.
and we were really close to Man City. I'd think, you know what, we've won a few things this year. Um,
I completely agree with you, and I'm glad you said that about the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup specifically as well, because like you said, I absolutely love the FA Cup. I feel like its reputation has been diminished a little bit. I don't know why, because it is such a special competition for me. I think it's the oldest competition in English football, potentially even world football. I'm not
yeah,
too sure if that's correct or not, but it is really special. And to be the team that has won it the most over its history,
yeah,
14 times. 15, of course, would sound better, of course, but it's a really special tournament for me. And in terms of the actual League Cup, the Carabao Cup itself,
mm,
it's a competition that we haven't won since 1993, and that's 8 years before I was born. I've never seen us win a League Cup. So whilst it's probably right at the bottom in terms of priority, right at the bottom shouldn't mean not important at all. And I think that's
yeah,
probably one of my main criticisms of Arteta. We haven't gone far enough in the cup competitions. We've had the embarrassment that we did a couple of seasons, 3 seasons ago, I believe it is now, against Nottingham Forest. We got knocked out early to West Ham this season. I think he can definitely do a little bit better when it comes to
yeah.
the cup competitions, as I feel like he underestimates those a lot. We've had some real disappointments in the cup competitions, and I think that's one element of his management that he needs to improve on. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think those trophies are so important
Mm.
because I think a few seasons back you could understand that we would put a weaker team out because our squad
Yeah,
wasn't as big as what it was now. I think looking back I do get that, but I think next season, I
we've
think
got the
when it
squad.
gets to maybe a quarter final, I think it's important to put more of a stronger team out. I think
Yeah.
it would
Well,
be
we didn't even
amazing.
get there. That we didn't even get there.
Yeah,
We didn't get that far this season. So I think especially the West Ham one for me shocked me because he
yeah,
didn't put out a particularly strong team for that. I remember he had Rice on the bench, which I believe was absolute insanity. The West Ham
yeah,
fans were really getting onto him after his move, and I really don't know why because £100 odd million. You got a lot of money for him. You made some fantastic signings as a result of him. He helped you lift your first European
Yeah.
trophy in years, and the first trophy of any major. They've won a championship 10 years ago, or whatever
Yeah.
it was, but a big trophy. And I know it's, again, in terms of the importance, in terms of the European trophy, it's right at the bottom. But like I said, right at the bottom isn't important. It was still massive for West Ham. It wouldn't have the same effect, for example, if a Manchester City was to go and win the Conference League. That is a
Yeah.
huge achievement. It's a huge achievement for a team like West Ham.
Yeah.
And he was the person, the captain, that lifted that trophy for them. So the hate that Declan Rice gets is absolutely beyond me. And I'm so glad that when
Yeah.
we beat them, when we did at the West Ham Stadium, he got the 2 assists and scored an amazing goal as well, because it really started to silence some of their fans.
Yeah, I think for me, I do find it a bit strange because, like you said, he's done a lot for West Ham. He's been
Of
there
course,
at
yeah.
such a young age, and he's obviously won that trophy. And I think West Ham fans must have known one day he would leave for a bigger team that would,
Yeah, of course.
whether that's United or Man City, it would always happen, one day. So I do think the fans have been a little bit unfair to him. I think, he will move on. And when he's played against them, he's never really celebrated, if I'm aware. So he's
No,
always
he
been
hasn't.
respectful to
Mm.
them. So I think it has been a bit unfair, really, I think. But I think, like you said, I think we've not really ever gotten that far in, the quarterfinals in some of these cups. So I think next season, even if we do get a Liverpool or Man City or a tough team early on, I think we've just got to go and win it. I mean, it is hard because I know we'll have to balance out the league as well, the Champions League. I mean, the Champions League this season, I wasn't really surprised when we got knocked out in the quarterfinals
Mm.
because I thought, it's our first season and this
Yeah,
team will just be quite, happy to experience this. And a lot of them haven't
absolutely.
really experienced it. I mean, Ramsdale, good to see him, play there because he really helped us over the years. I mean, Saka as well. Um, but for next season, whether that's the league, the Champions League, like what would you say your expectations are in like the different type of competitions that we'll be in?
Yeah, so I like to go off of minimum expectations, and for
Yeah.
me, the minimum expectation would be to continue to challenge, at
Mm.
least for the league, right up to the final day if we need to.
Yeah.
Again, I think anything less than that, and not putting up a fight for
Mm.
the title, would be a bit concerning for me. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say unacceptable, because it's one of the hardest leagues in the world. It's one of the toughest leagues in the world to compete in. So it's not unacceptable if we don't put up a
Yeah.
title challenge, but it would be really concerning, and it would absolutely be a step backwards if we weren't to do so. I believe we will win an FA Cup or a Carabao Cup as a minimum. And in terms of the Champions League, I think it's, baby steps with that,
Yeah.
because we was out of it for so long. I'm quite happy that we managed to even get past the round of 16, because that's been a massive hill for us to climb over the
Yeah.
last few times that we've been in it. I think the last time we got through to the knockout stages of the Champions League was ironically against Porto. Sorry, out of the round of 16, sorry, was against Porto, and I think that we won 5-1 on the day. Benton scored a hat trick, and that was 2010. So it had been a long time since we got
Yeah.
through to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. And when I saw the Bayern draw, it was real, oh, like tough to see, because while
Yeah.
it's not the same Bayern Munich that it's been over the last few years, they're really struggling domestically. Then Bayern Leverkusen have gone on to do an invincible season, and congratulations to them for that.
Yeah.
And I know it's not the same Bayern Munich, but it's still a Bayern Munich that were, struggling domestically and wanted to prove a point in Europe, and really did that against us. They put up a massive fight, especially at the Emirates, where they didn't have any fans with them, to come
Yeah.
there and get the draw. Big result, and then they bring it home in Munich, went on to the semi-final. I'd like to think we would have beaten Real Madrid. I'm not too sure if that would have happened or not, though. But I think at least we could have got to the semis this season.
Yeah.
In terms of next season, I think we do need to get past that quarterfinal stage. And I know
Yeah.
I know it's a case of, whoever you draw. I'm hoping that we can stay away from the likes of Real Madrid, who I believe will go on to win the Champions League this season. And we'll just see where we go from there. But I think for me, the minimum would be the
Yeah.
semi-finals for the Champions League, continue to challenge for the Premier League, and then win a Carabao or FA Cup.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much the same. I think with the
Mm.
league, I think we've got to, maintain kind of where we are. I think,
Yes.
I think the summer's going to be big because I think, especially whoever will leave, I think if we bring in more players as well, I think
Yeah.
that'll be good, especially if we're in other competitions, like you say. So it would definitely help. I think the Champions League, I'm very much with you. I think this season, I thought, the quarterfinals would probably be, an acceptable time. If you
Yeah.
went, I'd understand. But I definitely think, the semi-finals would be, I think it's good. If you're getting a step further as each season's going on, I think that would be the best thing. I think, I think with the league, it's going to be big next season because I think, 2 points behind Man City, if we can just push a bit more and get these points in games, like we weren't able to in the West
Of
Hams of
course.
Fulham. But like you said, I think with Villa, I think looking back, you can accept that we didn't win because we
Yeah.
said Uli Emery has done a fantastic job. So, yeah, I think and it shows you how tough the Premier League is at the moment. It's so competitive, especially with Man City. It is hard competing with them, but I think you'd make a good point that we do seem to go in the right direction and we are improving each season, which is so important. And I know the summer is going to be very big. I mean, I'll speak about who you'd want to bring in and what sort of positions because I know, there could be players that could be leaving, especially in that midfield. I mean, I know of players, like Reece Nelson or Vieira, Smith Rowe. A lot of them haven't really had many opportunities. So for you, like, what positions do you think next season we definitely need to improve in?
I think the standout for me would definitely be that striker position, and I
Yeah,
don't want to take away from anything that Kai Havertz has done this season. I was one of the biggest. I don't want to say haters of the transfer. I had my reservations about the
yeah,
transfer. I don't think he had a particularly great time at Chelsea. Minus scoring in the Champions League final, which is a pretty big minus to be
yeah,
fair, of course.
yeah,
But for £65 million, I believe we could have done a lot better at the time in the transfer market. But Kai Havertz finished the season with 14 goals and 7 assists in all competitions, but it's not the 25 goals a season that
mm,
Manchester City have up top. In their case,
yeah,
even more than that. I think Haaland finished the season on 27 or 28 goals. It's not the 25 to 30 goals that you need from a striker to win a title. Jesus has
yeah,
proved that he isn't really that player over the last
mm,
2 seasons either. Nketiah, for me, he's a lovely guy. I've been privileged enough to meet and work with him on a few occasions. But for me, in terms of ability, I think his time's up at Arsenal. And I think that's
yeah,
become evident this season with the limited amount of game time that he's had. And when he's potentially had the opportunity to come in and play up top, he's opted for a Leandro Trossard or he's
yeah,
opted for a Gabriel Martinelli. So I think that for me signals his time is up at Arsenal. In terms of who that player would be, in terms of getting a striker in, it's going to cost a lot of money. And we'll get onto the outgoings in a moment because I believe
yeah,
there is going to be a few outgoings in order to get the window that I believe we need completed. But for me, it has to be one of either Alexander Isak, Victor Osimhen, Ollie Watkins, or
yeah,
Ivan Toney. And I would probably go in that order as well. For me,
yeah,
the number one priority, especially after seeing him this season, Alexander Isak has to be the priority for me. And I
yeah,
think
me
you're
too.
probably still looking around the £100 million mark for a player of his quality. However, I say that, Newcastle might have their financial fair play issues. We might be able to get him for even closer to his market value, which I believe at the time of recording is around £70 million or something like that. So maybe we can look between that range of 70 to £100 million to get a player like Isak to the
Yeah,
club. And for me, if we was to do that, that would minus Aubameyang, that would probably be the closest we've got to getting that Thierry Henry
yeah,
replacement because he's the complete forward. He's tall, he's fast, he can dribble, he can finish in all kinds of ways. He could, absolutely a complete striker for me. And he's
yeah,
probably the most Arsenal player to never play for Arsenal as well in that sense. And our captain Martin Odegaard played with him at Real Sociedad. So maybe there's a little bit of a connection there. Maybe he can get some convincing done to get into Arsenal. But absolutely for me, he would be the priority, closely followed by Victor Osimhen. Now, I think the difference
yeah,
with Victor is that he's going to probably cost a little bit more. I believe his release clause is around £120 million or something around along those lines, proven in Europe, which I think is a big thing, but obviously not proven in the Premier League. And we've seen that that doesn't always
yeah,
translate very well. You saw it with Darwin Núñez, who's still yet to convince all of the players, all of the Liverpool fans about his performances. You look at Nicholas Jackson, who had a good season in Europe last year. Again, yet to convince all of the Chelsea fans, for example. So I think that would be my only reservation on Victor Osimhen. But again, can't really doubt his
yeah,
ability. Ollie Watkins, Arsenal fan, a great player. He had a very good season. I think 20 goals, 13 assists or something along those lines. But I think the only reason we're probably not going to get that over the line, again, I think all four strikers that I've mentioned, you're probably looking at £100 million plus. And the fact that Aston Villa have got Champions League, they're not going to want to get rid of Ollie Watkins. Absolutely not for me. So I don't think that's very likely.
yeah,
And then right at the bottom of that list, again, I would still be happy with that. It probably just a little bit lower in terms of importance and, priority
yeah,
for me. Ivan Toney. Um, Again, a player, no doubting his ability. proven in the Premier League, hasn't had the opportunity to do so yet in Europe. I think the only issues and my only reservations about Ivan Toney would be the age, 28 years old. I think at best you probably get 4 seasons out of him. And for £100 million, £25 million a season, is it really going to be worth spending £100 million on that player? And the second thing is the attitude. Obviously, during his time at Brentford, there's been some quite notable cases of him disrespecting the club or not a lot. Maybe it's a situation of he thinks he's bigger than the club. That doesn't work at Arsenal. You know, Arteta made it very clear that no player is bigger than the club with situations like Aubameyang. And, you know, if he can get rid of Aubameyang the way he did, he would have absolutely no issue with getting rid of a player like Ivan Toney. If Ivan was to come in, again, no doubting his ability, I just believe that relationship with Mikel would sour very quickly and he'd be in and out of the club within 18 months or so, give or take. So that's it in terms of that's it in terms of the striker. But obviously there's a few more positions that I want to get onto as well. Second, I'm going to do it in order of priority as well. So we've got, obviously, my main priority was be a striker. I think we need some competition with Bukayo Saka on that right-hand side. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm of the opinion that Bukayo Saka is a world-class player. And I understand that not everyone shares the same opinion of me. And I believe the reason behind that is because he doesn't have that competition to start every week. Realistically speaking, Arteta is never going to start Reece Nelson over Bukayo Saka unless he really needs to. So I understand where people are coming from when they say he's not quite at that level. And I think the reason behind that is he needs that competition behind him because, like I said, regardless, he knows he starts every week. Regardless of if he plays well, if he plays bad. So to get some competition in behind Bukayo Saka would be ideal for me. Now, the person that I would bring in this case would be Michael Olise from Crystal Palace. And I think the convincer for me was that Manchester United game when he ended Casemiro's career. That was an unbelievable performance from Michael Olise. And, you know, he's had a fantastic season, probably looking at around £60 million for him. But this is the kind of money that you need to continue spending if you're going to go on and, you know, win a Premier League trophy. This for me, if we was to sign Olise for that amount of money, that would sort of, and I'm not saying he's anywhere near the level of the player that I'm about to mention, but it would also be like a Riyad Mahrez level kind of signing that he was for Manchester City in the sense that, you know, he's just going to provide that competition. He's not going to come in and just be an immediate starter, but he's going to provide that competition for the immediate starter. So that's how I can see Michael Olise coming into the Arsenal side. If not Michael Olise, I mentioned about Gabriel Jesus earlier. I don't think he's the striker that we need to win a Premier League, but I definitely can see him going over and becoming a winger full-time. He did that at Manchester City out on the right-hand side. I can definitely see him, if we bring in a striker, going out to the right or left-hand side on a permanent basis and, you know, providing that competition with Bukayo Saka. So they're really the main two for me. In terms of the other two, I think we potentially need to look at a holding midfielder. If Thomas Partey was to go, I wouldn't go out of my way to sell Thomas Partey, but I understand that, you know, we only get Partey for, if we're lucky, 40% of a season. You know, his availability is a big concern. The injuries are a big concern. So if he was to go, I'd be sad to see him go. But again, I completely would understand. And the two I'd be looking at were Bruno Guimaraes from Newcastle United. I know he's got a release clause coming up, I think around £100 million as well. So there's going to be some big money spent, absolutely. But the other one I'd look at, minus the age, is Joao Palhinha from Fulham as well. I think he's an absolutely solid choice for that holding midfielder position. And just to round things off, you know, I think it's very clear that we've seen the last of Aaron Ramsdale in an Arsenal shirt. And that's sad for me because, like I said, as a goalkeeper myself, I really feel sorry for him because this is another criticism that I've got of Mikel Arteta. I don't believe he's handled this goalkeeping situation very, very well. You know, he brought David Raya in on loan and he said to the media, and he probably said to Aaron behind the scenes as well, it's a 2 number ones situation. You know, whoever performs better is going to play. And I think everything he did from that point onwards says otherwise. It was very, very clear that David Raya was the favourite over the season. I think Ramsdale only played 3 or 4 games after Raya came in, and you know, because of that, it knocked his confidence. You saw it when he played against Luton, the mistake that he made there. I think the West Ham game in the Carabao Cup, where I think he made a mistake from one of the goals, completely shattered his confidence. And it's a shame because a big part of why we are where we are at the moment in terms of competing for the league and being back in the Champions League is mainly because of Aaron Ramsdale for me. You know, I think it was absolutely criminal that we didn't get to see him play in the Champions League for us. Because like I said, he was a big reason why we're back in the position in the first place. And unfortunately, it looks like he's probably going to be leaving this season. I'm just hoping he doesn't go to Chelsea.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Because that would be painful. But I do feel like if he leaves, we need another goalkeeper that's better than Carl Jacob Hein, because I don't think Hein is sufficient enough. That hasn't got the sufficient ability to be a backup goalkeeper in terms of the targets. Keylor Navas from PSG is going to be available on a free transfer at the end of the season. And another one that I would be looking at as well, and I'm not sure if anyone would share the same opinion as me, Thomas Kaminski, who's just been relegated with Luton Town, of course, one of the most saves in the Premier League this season. He's got them a few points this season. I know it wasn't enough to keep them up, but the saves, he did his job essentially. He made saves. It just wasn't enough to keep him up, and I think that's definitely an option that we can be looking at as a backup goalkeeper.
Yeah, there's so many, you've named that. I completely agree. I do
Yeah.
think the striker one, I think if we got a striker in, we would definitely, be so much better. I mean, we have been scoring tons of goals towards, since Dubai, but I just feel like if we brought someone in, I'd be
Yeah.
made up. I do like Isaac, like you said. I think he does give me, Henri vibes, and I think he just suits Arsenal from what you see of him. It would just be a really good fit. I mean, as you mentioned with Ollie Watkins, like I couldn't imagine Villa selling him, and
Not
I
this
know
season.
that, yeah, I know he's like an Arsenal fan, and I do think he would love to play for Arsenal. But it might be the wrong time for him to come, maybe if he wants to experience being in the Champions League with Villa. It is going to be tough in the summer as well. I mean, I know outgoings, it's going to be interesting, really. I mean, there's one player, like, I don't mind, I think if Partey went, I'd be okay with it, but I'm not, like, I'm open to selling him, but I wouldn't mind if he stayed.
Yeah, I completely agree.
I think a lot of us know that he isn't fit enough, and I have seen him towards the end of the season. He has been a little bit poor, and he is struggling a little bit, and he's never really managed to really deal with those injuries. And it does happen, unfortunately, and it's not really his fault. It's just the Premier League is such a competitive league, and he has to be
Yeah.
fit for so many games, not just in the league, but in other competitions. So I think a lot of fans now do feel prepared for Partey to move on, but if he stayed as well, I'd be happy to have him as well. I mean, I know his contract probably ends soon anyway, so it'd be interesting to
Yeah.
see with that as well. I mean, there is one player that if he did go, I would be upset. I mean, Smith Rowe, it's quite interesting because he came on in the game. I'm sure he hit the crossbar and he just looked good. I mean, how are you feeling about the situation? Do you think he's played his last game for Arsenal, or do you think Arteta might give him another season to maybe give him more time?
So I feel so sorry for Emil Smith Rowe because I
Yeah,
feel like what happened, it was obviously we all saw how good Emil Smith Rowe can be. The season where he scored 10 goals in the league, it was one of our standout players. They gave him the number 10 shirt after, the Mesut Ozil and Dennis Bergkamps of years gone by. And I know it raised a lot of eyebrows at the time, but that season that he got the shirt, he really did it proud.
yeah,
Hasn't scored nearly, I think it's over 2 years now since the last goal that we saw Emil Smith Rowe score
yeah,
against Chelsea. I believe we won 4-2 that game. So, I feel that the problem that Emil Smith Rowe's had is he got an injury at a really awkward time because
yeah,
everyone in the positions that he plays started to do so well. Then we brought in the likes of Leandro Trossard, who's come in and just done amazing work as well. So it was a case of, bad timing in terms of that injury that he got, and he's just not been able to push himself back into the team. I think he's made a few cameos this year and looked pretty promising. I look at that
yeah,
Sheffield United game, I believe it was the one he came on and, he had a really good game. Unfortunately, it didn't end in a goal, but I still think he had a good performance. And it would be a shame to see him leave on a permanent basis.
yeah,
However, I think the best course of action for Emil Smith Rowe at this time would be a loan move. I don't know, the person that I compare it to in a way was what happened with Jesse Lingard when he was out of favour at
yeah,
Manchester United, went on loan to West Ham. Really built up his name again. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for him in the long term.
mm,
Ended up going to Nottingham Forest. Didn't really make much of an impact there, and now I think he's playing in South Korea or something like
yeah,
that. So I'm hoping that obviously Emil Smith Rowe goes down the route of going out on loan to help him rebuild his career, and then returns and has a better time for Arsenal. Absolutely.
yeah. It's going to be hard for him to get that game
Yeah.
time because there is a lot of competition. You mentioned Trossard; he's been amazing this
Yeah.
season. What a great signing he's been, and it'd be unfair to kind of drop players that are deserve to be in the starting
Of
11. But
course.
I think, I think you make a good point about if he goes on loan, he gives them that game time. And then, if he gets his goals up, he'll have a lot of confidence coming back into the team. And I think, if you do go on loan, you can come back. I mean, I know a lot of players, you see that with Tierney, he's gone on loan and he probably won't come back. I mean,
Mm,
I do see Smith Rowe coming back to Arsenal if we did loan him out.
yeah.
I think it would be a good option because I know he's obviously had quite a few injuries, which has been tough, and Arteta didn't want to rush him in too soon with things. But I really love Smith Rowe. I remember the season when the Aubameyang was there. I think they all worked really well. Him and Saka.
Yeah.
I think there is so much potential for Smith Rowe to work here at Arsenal. I think if we did sell him, I would always think, what if, because it could have
Yeah.
gone well. Yeah.
Of course, I understand. I understand that, but however, obviously, I like some of the targets that I mentioned. We're going to have to
Yeah.
generate money somehow, and if it was to be on a
Mm.
permanent basis, I would
Yeah.
be really disappointed if we weren't able to get a minimum of £40 million for him. Because
Yeah.
if you look at it, he's only going to, I don't think that's obviously he went out on loan to Leipzig, and I don't think he had the best of times there. I don't see him as the kind of player that will go and play abroad.
Mm.
It would probably be to an English team, and
Yeah.
I don't want to strengthen a rival in any way unless we can get big money out of it. So I think as a minimum,
Mm.
£40 million if he
Yeah.
was to go on a permanent basis, but I don't think that's the right course of action.
Yeah, I think with someone like Smith Rowe, if we need money for maybe a striker or the midfield, whatever
Hmm.
position, I think you do have to look at the players we have now and think how much money could we get. I mean, I think as well we mentioned the Ketia. I think Arteta probably knows it, and I think it's obvious to us that he's not been
Yeah,
playing, which means he'll be going in the summer. And I think I've always said we speak about he's a great guy, but I think last season he really tried to carry us when Jesus got injured, and I'll always be grateful. But I do think he will be moving on. I mean,
yeah.
which team could you imagine him playing at? Do you think it'd be a Premier League team or what type
So
of?
this is a really awkward one for me because this is a debate that happens a lot in the AFTV studio. I'm not sure if you've spoken to him or not. I know you've spoken to quite a few of the guys, but have you spoken to Laurie yet?
No, not yet.
No. So Eddie, Laurie is Eddie Nketiah's biggest fan, and it's really funny at times because he is so desperate for Eddie to do well. And I understand that he's an
Yeah.
Arsenal fan. He wants to see Arsenal players do well. I completely understand it. I just don't think that Eddie Nketiah is of the level that he needs to be at Arsenal. And the question came up from another, I can't remember who it was in the studio, but who could Eddie Nketiah go and play for? And I think it'd be really hard to put him into any starting 11 in the league at the moment. It's a really awkward one. I could see Eddie Nketiah going to one of the newly promoted teams, whether that be
Yeah.
Leicester, whether that be Ipswich, or who were the
Mm.
other ones that got promoted? It was Leicester, Ipswich, and
I don't think the next one's ready. I think it's
the
between
playoff. Yes,
the playoff.
Southampton and Leeds. So obviously he's got a history at Leeds under Marcel Bielsa. I know it started really well for him.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'd be interested in going back to Leeds, but I could definitely see him going to one of the newly promoted teams. I just think he'd struggle to get into any of the
Mm.
starting 11s for any of the
Yeah.
current Premier League teams. And again, it's a situation where I think, a minimum of £20 million.
Yeah.
He's not scored nearly as many goals as he probably should have by the age of, I think he's 24, 25 at this point. And he's got a lot to prove still. And he's been
Yeah.
around for a long time as well. I was actually there at his first game. I was there when he scored, the last minute winner, the equaliser against Norwich, and went on to score the winner as well. And that was nearly 8 years ago now. And he's still not made the necessary impact that
Mm.
I believe he should have made at this time. So I think it's as sad as it is, because obviously he's a Hale End boy and stuff like that. I think it's time to move Eddie Nketiah on. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have wanted it to work with Nketiah because I remember when he did sign that new deal. I think it was a season or two ago. I think what I
And they
thought.
gave him the number 14 shirt.
Yeah, a lot of fans were really unhappy with that. I mean, it's quite weird because I know big players have worn that shirt. I mean,
Yeah,
I wasn't too bothered to be honest with you.
I,
But
I kind of get you. I mean, at the end of the day, it is only a shirt number. I understand that, but the problem that
yeah,
Arsenal created for him is they gave him the shirt number. The shirt number worn by Thierry Henry Martin Keown, and I said it already, Theo Walcott, who, whilst he wasn't everyone's favourite, still wanted to score over 100 goals for the club. To give him that number when Martinelli was right there,
Yeah.
for me, was insanity. And I always thought it would be a risk. And I think people potentially judged him harshly because of that, because of the shirt number. And, you know, I get it. At the end of the day, it's only a shirt number, but it was the shirt number. So I understand.
Yeah, I think Martinelli, you know, he's been so amazing since we've signed him, and I think he would fit that shirt, you know, really good. And it's hard because I suppose if you look at players like you said who's worn that shirt, he's not really like kind of, you know, done the expectation of, you know, the players that have worn it. He's not lifted up to that. So I completely get it. It's like with Smith Rowe wearing that number 10 shirt. I mean, I was kind of happy. I didn't mind Smith Rowe wearing that shirt because at the time, you know, he was probably one of our, you know, maybe most consistent players. He was just working really hard. So I think, you know, it felt like okay. I didn't mind that. I mean, I know a lot of fans have their opinions on, you know, shirt numbers. If, you know, Nketiah, it's a difficult one with Nketiah because I know there were times where
Yeah.
it's been very weird. I watched him from the start off, so I always did believe in him. But I think, like you said, he kind of never kind of did it. I don't think he can consistently week in week out, you know, score the goals that we need. But I think, like you said, I think in the Premier League, I mean, I used to think Crystal Palace maybe you could go there, but I think the squad they've got now,
You
they're
look
just
at it
on
now.
fire. How would you get in
I
there?
mean, Mateta alone is on fire at the moment. So I think Eddie Nketiah would even
Yeah,
struggle to get into the likes of a Crystal Palace. But before, you know, Mateta's
yeah,
sudden, you know, becoming a decent striker, I could have understand where you was coming
yeah.
from. But I think that ship sailed now that he's doing well.
Yeah, it would be too. I think it would be very unfair to kind of drop the players for the
Of
Nketiah. But
course.
yeah, I mean, people have maybe said championship team, but I kind of think he's probably a bit better. I think, like you said,
Yeah.
maybe, you know, a promoted team that have come up. I mean, we saw the Conga, you know, he actually did really well, I thought, when he was at Luton. I know he was on loan, but I think sometimes, you know, going to a team that's newly promoted, it just works well. So I definitely think that could be a good option, but it'll be really interesting to see what does happen in the summer. I'm pretty excited about it. But thank you so much for coming on my channel today. It's
No
been
worries.
really lovely to meet you, to chat about Arsenal. I do really appreciate you coming on.
No worries. I appreciate you inviting me as well. And like I said, you've done fantastic work so far. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. And yeah, I hope you guys do watch this back and do enjoy it. As I always say, don't forget to hit the like button for me, do subscribe, and I shall see you all in my next video.